Hey there, Jimmy Roberts from Renaissance Appraisal. And today I'm going to bring you inside of a unique situation. One of the things that we as appraisers and real estate professionals and probably the general public think about appraising properties is that it's all scientific and everything has to be down precise to the penny. Well, the reality is that's not necessarily true. And the reality for that is it's really a simple thing. Not every house is the same. For instance, right now I'm inside of a property that is probably just under 3,000 square feet in a neighborhood of where the typical square footage is about 1,500 square feet. What makes this property even more unique is that this property is actually constructed on a crawl and slab foundation, whereas the majority of other properties within the 3 mile radius, like 98.5%, are all constructed on basement foundations. So you have some very, very unique situations. From the exterior, you would never notice about this particular house. But once you get inside, you see that there's a whole additional, basically, wing to the house that was constructed, that it was clearly an add-on, but it was done properly. I mean, you know, it is what it is. As we're here, as I'm walking through this property, I'm sitting here thinking to myself, man, if it were just a simple 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom colonial, then that's one thing we can deal with and we can knock that sucker out real quick because, quite frankly, there are other 2-bed or 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom colonials in the area. But what happens when you don't have that cookie cutter? That's where your real experience about valuing property comes into it. You got to go beyond just the, for lack of a better term, you got to go beyond the form. And as you already know, when we do real estate appraisals, oftentimes, especially for lenders, we rely on the form that Fannie Mae says that we all have to use. So again, what happens when your situation doesn't fit neatly in those little boxes? Well, that's when you got to start thinking about things like, okay, so what are the other properties in the area that have sold recently, relatively recently, right? Because you're not going to have a lot, relatively recently, that are also not on foundations, not on basement foundations. So you go and look for those and you find maybe one or two. Then you say, okay, well, this is a 3,000 square foot property. What are the other properties that are about 3,000 square foot? Where are they? And what do they look like in reference to this one? What type of functionality do they offer in reference to this one? And then you find out that those properties, of course, are built on basement foundations. Of course they are. And they are probably, I don't know, 10 to 15 years old, whereas this property is probably 80 years old. Well, those aren't necessarily directly comparable. Even though this property has had some recent updates, maybe even some renovations. Specifically, I noticed the kitchens has been pretty well done, actually. With a newer granite, some of the grayer white granite. I know white granite is kind of the thing now, and when this video is being made, but this is still very timely. The colors, the gray color theme, kind of goes with what we're talking about nowadays. So you got to kind of figure out and use the old thinker to figure out some other ways to compare this property to some other recently sold properties. And also, it has to make sense for this particular neighborhood. Because again, this property is not located in the neighborhood of similar properties. This property is located in the neighborhood of 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom ranches. I mean, it is. That's really what we're looking at. And it is a 3,000 square foot colonial with another room attached to it that makes up to 3,000 square feet. So the question becomes, like I said, how do you figure that out? Well, as I look at this, and just to give you a heads up, one of the things that I'll be looking at is, again, I'm looking at properties without basements. That's probably the biggest characteristic that I'm looking for. Why? Because quite frankly, I can adjust for kind of everything else, right? I don't really know how much of a basement or how much people put value on a basement. Tends to be pretty considerable, but I don't really know, and it's very difficult. I have too few sales to even figure it out mathematically. So that's one of my major criteria. My next criteria is, actually, that's pretty much it. That's my major criteria. I'm going to look for that, and I'm going to look for within a reasonable distance from this property, because I want to stay in the same school district, and within a specific radius that's reasonable. Again, how many properties are going to be like this one? Well, first off, I'll tell you right now, there are no properties like this one. The question becomes, how many properties are going to offer reasonable functionalities that are similar. And that's where I'm going to have to really focus my efforts. When I get that done, then I'm going to have to do all that analysis, and then I'm going to have to bring all that back to what actually is happening in this particular neighborhood. Because it's not realistic to say that this property is a 3,000 square foot property, and maybe 3,000 square foot properties in the area in general, not just those without basements, are selling for, I don't know, $500,000, where in this particular neighborhood, all the houses in the neighborhood are selling for, I don't know, $100,000. To come back and say, well, this one's 3,000 square foot, so it must be, I don't know, $450,000. That doesn't make sense. But there is going to be somewhere in that range, right? We know that much. The question is, where exactly in that range does it fall? Also, the other thing that we need to consider when we're putting together that valuation and doing that reconciliation and really thinking about where does this property fall in line of other properties in the area is, again, functionality, right? If you are looking in this particular neighborhood that I'm in right now, like I said, most homes are 3-bedroom, 2.5 bathroom ranches constructed on basement foundations. Are you really going to be interested in a 2-story colonial with no basement that's 3,000 square feet? The 3,000 square feet excites you, but maybe having a basement is really important to you. I don't know. Maybe having 1 story is really important to you, like a ranch, like most of the other properties. That may be something that's really important to you. And that's fine. But again, the fact that this property is so unique, it's definitely going to affect its overall marketability. So I don't have any solutions to that right now, because I'm just on site right now looking at the property. But these are the types of things that we as real estate appraisers and all real estate professionals, need to really consider when we're doing our property valuations and or walkthroughs, right? It is what it is. Just because a property is 3,000 square feet doesn't mean that it's more appealing in this particular market than a property that may be 1,200 square feet and that's a ranch. So hopefully we'll add more to this later, but that's just something that I wanted to share, because like I said, this is a really unique situation. It's going to take a lot of brain power to figure this one out, but that's okay. That's part of the puzzle. Have a great one.